Okay, so in this video, I'm going to have a look at how to write a statement of intent. It's in two parts. The first bit is the easy bit. I would do this right at the start of your project, so it can be really brief, really concise, and you're just summing up in a couple of lines what you're actually going to do. So there's a couple of examples on here, and it suggests looking at the Pentagram website. So that is a huge design agency. If you've never heard of Pentagram, look it up and see how they're talking about their projects, because they sum them up in a very brief way that is pretty easy to sort of get your head around explaining. So, for example, I'll just go through one of these. The Meteor, that's a brand identity for a new creative collective working together to advance gender and racial equality and justice. So what you need to sort of say is, this is what it's doing. That's what it says on the tin. That's what's going to be in this project. Simple as that. Have a look at the others on that slide, but they're all very concise ways of explaining what the project is about. This is an example from a student doing a cinema-based project. So looking at the film industry, and particularly at how streaming services have sort of decimated the cinema industry. So people actually going and experiencing film and theatre took a big hit, particularly during the pandemic, and they wanted to sort of get people going to the cinema again. So they've got over a couple of pages there, one sentence explaining that it's going to be an independent film festival and the reasoning for doing that. So dead straightforward. Everybody would be able to do that, I think. So now comes the harder stage. As your project develops and you really know exactly what you've started doing and what you plan on doing, you need to sort of pack it out a bit with a bit more detail. So I would put this kind of after your initial research, after your initial sketching, not too much towards the end of the project, but probably just before halfway. This is a good screen for you to sort of pause it on and take a look at all these points in detail. But everything that it's describing on this screen, you're probably going to need to sort of sit down and plan on paper. You might even be doing a note on your phone or something like that, but I'll show the image that's sort of small there in the corner. So this is like the planning for a project called Pocket Trips. So it's going to be a travel kit for children. They've said what the audience of that sort of product's going to be. They've put some clear outcomes. So it's saying they want a logo for the brand. They want it to be different for each capital city that they feature. They're going to look at packaging because they're going to box it up. It's going to have a map for each individual city as well that they look at. It's got a set of information cards for each city, and it's got a small journal. It says it's themed differently on the capital city that they're looking at, and possibly stickers, badges, ideas like that. Now, if they don't get to do all these things, they're still going to get credit for actually sort of developing an idea in the first place that they could take and run with. Now, it says in the bottom left there that they've got like a plan to cover what we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but over half a dozen cities there. This student might not get time to do that, but at least if you've set out with a clear plan, you've got like a bit of a rationale to work through as the project progresses. So that sort of page of note taking should help you do this, because a lot of these things like what is the company name, that's on there as like the second point down. That's not a 2-minute job. The company name that you're coming up with could make or break this project, because if it's got a good catchy name and a name that leads to lots of sort of logo opportunities and design ideas, that's clearly going to help you. Thinking about what they're going to make, who the target market is, that's a video in itself. If you're doing a rebrand and it's an existing company, what is the current image like? You know, what sort of services do they offer at the moment, and who are their consumers? Over on the right in bold is just kind of questions to sort of think about. You don't all have to write about these things, because for some of you, you might not be doing like an advertising or branding project, but I would say stereotypically graphic design students tend to go down that route, whether it ends up being a magazine, packaging, or promotional material for a product. It doesn't really matter, but it kind of always sort of goes a little bit more commercial than maybe a fine art project, just because of the nature of graphic design. So that's not to say that you can't do something that's more personal. I've put a few examples here with the sort of big title heading there of provide context. That is the key thing. So if you're looking at doing a campaign for something you feel strongly about, you're sort of trying to explore the issue, or you're focusing on a sport or an industry like, say, the fashion industry or the music industry, then you're going to do a project based around that. So you need to sort of be the one who's explaining the context. So if you're going to do a project about sustainable fashion, usually you're doing that because you think that the fashion industry is quite wasteful at the moment. So you kind of need to go on a bit of a journey and prove that that is the case, and what are you going to do about it. And all those things are going to come up in your statement of intent naturally as you discuss what you're about to go and do. So the first sort of section of this video focused on if you're going to do a project to do with advertising and branding. The second part of this is now looking at projects that are more personal to the individual student. So I can't give you a set list of what to write about these projects because you're writing it from your own point of view. And what I would like you to do is sort of have a look at this statement of intent that I've got on screen and have a bit of a read through it. So because this student's doing persona, it naturally lends itself to being a personal project. She's going to look at her own friends and include people's perceptions of their own identities. So she went on to do interviews with these people, and she made like plasticine models of them. That ended up being turned into an animation. The animation then became part of a video all about her group of friends and what they thought of themselves really, and how that differed from what they were portraying to other people and how other people maybe perceived them. So that's why I can't give you like a set checklist for this, because each one is quite different. This one here, it's probably quite hard for you to read depending on what sort of device you've got on screen, but he wants to look at street culture, and essentially that is describing him wanting to make products that him and his friends would want to buy, and he knows along the way he's got to justify sort of why he's making those design choices. He can't just say, I'm making something because it looks cool. He's got to kind of say, right, I've looked at these people and I like their style. The style's currently popular, and for that reason I'm going to go down the same sort of style with my design work. One of the main reasons I put this page in is if you look at that first statement of intent, although the project was amazing and it went on to be one of the best in the year group, arguably the presentation on this makes this look a little bit more professional. So just showing the text on the right, big and bold, broken up, you've got to sort of work a little bit to figure out what it says, and you almost feel rewarded when you do figure out what it's talking about. It just visually looks good. I mean, if you recognise the thumbnail of this video, it's a screenshot of this statement of intent because I thought it looked, nice and slick and eye-catching. And because you are graphic design students, you're getting marked on your presentation, so it makes total sense to focus on how your presentation comes across. All right, so this is the last one I'm going to show you. It is a well laid out statement of intent. This student decided to call it the idea proposal. Totally fine. An examiner, moderator, they would know exactly what you mean at this point, especially when they read through the content of it. So if you don't like the phrase statement of intent, idea proposal would be fine. Bear in mind, when the moderator's looking for your portfolio, they need to be able to figure out as soon as possible what you're going to be looking at. And that means that at least then when they're reading through your artist research, they've got a better understanding of why you're looking at those people. If they look at your sketch style, they'll understand why you're doing it like that. If they're looking at your digital ideas, they'll also see a lot quicker why you're doing the certain things that you are in your project. So flicking right back through to the start, this first easy bit, that needs to be done as soon as possible in the project, because at least then when they're flicking through, they're going to get a gut feeling whether the grade is right that the teacher's put it on, because they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that goes a long way. Okay, so last slide. The question that I want you to sort of think about now is your own project. If somebody read part 1 and part 2 of your statement of intent, providing they've got all the right skills and creativity, could they go away and do your project? If the answer is yes to that, then you've done a good job. You've explained your intentions, and somebody else could go away and do that project. That must mean that it's super clear exactly what you're going to do from the outset. I think the thing to bear in mind is this is often sort of fed into the scheme of work quite early on when you don't actually know exactly what you're going to do. That's why I introduce this a little bit later with my students. And I think if they do it towards the end of the project, at least at that point, they know exactly what they did. All right, if anyone's got any questions, just leave some comments below. But otherwise, hopefully you found this useful, and I'll catch you in the next one in a bit.